Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo decided to spend their vacation in the quiet mountains, away from the hustle and bustle of the big city. They hoped to spend time together, enjoy nature, and unwind. However, fate had other plans. After arriving at the foot of the mountain, they began their climb with enthusiasm. The fresh air and beautiful scenery made them forget all their busy lives. However, because they were too busy chatting, they accidentally took the wrong path. The map they brought turned out to be not very clear, and before they knew it, they were lost in the middle of the wilderness. The atmosphere of the forest, which was initially calm, began to feel tense. The sound of rustling leaves and chirping birds that had previously been calming now felt like strange whispers. Songhyekyo began to feel restless. "We shouldn't go too far from the main path," Gong Yoo said, trying to reassure her. However, both of them knew that they had gone too deep into the forest. Suddenly, a terrifying hissing sound echoed through the trees. From behind the bushes, a giant snake appeared with shiny scales that reflected the sunlight. Its golden yellow eyes stared sharply at them. Songhyekyo almost screamed, but Gong Yoo immediately covered her mouth with his hand. "Don't move," he whispered. However, the snake had already smelled their presence. With a swift movement, the snake slid towards them. "Run!" Gong Yoo shouted without thinking twice. The two of them immediately ran as fast as they could, breaking through the bushes and jumping over the tree roots that spread on the ground. The giant snake slid at a terrifying speed, wrapping around the tree trunk and slithering easily between the trees. Sweat poured down their faces, their breaths gasping. Songhyekyo almost fell when her foot got caught on a tree root, but Gong Yoo quickly pulled her and ran again. They found a fairly wide river in front of them. "We have to cross," Songhyekyo said in panic. "But the current is strong." Gong Yoo hesitated for a moment, but the hissing sound from behind left them with no choice. They dove into the river, trying to swim to the other side. The giant snake stopped at the edge of the river, staring at them angrily before moving away, as if waiting for another opportunity. After reaching land, they lay exhausted, staring at the sky that slowly changed color as dusk began to fall. They realized that the danger was not truly over. This forest still held many mysteries that they did not know. "We have to find a way out before nightfall," Gong Yoo said as he helped Songhyekyo stand up. With the remaining courage, they continued their journey, hoping to get out of the forest that was full of darkness and danger lurking in every corner. That night, they promised, if they managed to get out safely, they would never again ignore the hiking trail map and would be more careful in choosing their next adventure. As night fell, they found a small cave that was safe enough to take shelter. Gong Yoo lit a small fire using dry twigs that he had collected, while Songhyekyo sat down with a trembling body. "We have to take turns guarding," Gong Yoo said. "I'll guard first. You rest." Songhyekyo nodded slowly and tried to sleep, although fear still gripped her. Meanwhile, Gong Yoo remained alert, hearing strange sounds from within the forest. The shadows of the trees swayed along with the night wind, making the atmosphere even more tense. A few hours later, just as Songhyekyo was about to fall asleep, the rustling sound was heard again. This time, the sound was much closer. Gong Yoo immediately grabbed a large piece of wood just in case. From behind the darkness, the familiar golden yellow eyes reappeared. The giant snake had not left. "Wake up, Hye Kyo," Gong Yoo whispered in a hushed voice. Songhyekyo woke up and looked in the direction Gong Yoo was pointing. Her heart was beating fast. The snake was crawling slowly, this time more carefully, as if waiting for the right moment to attack. Without thinking, Gong Yoo pulled Songhyekyo's hand and ran out of the cave. They penetrated the darkness of the night, trying to avoid a surprise attack. Suddenly, they saw a light in the distance. "A watchtower! That could be our savior!" Songhyekyo exclaimed hopefully. They ran as hard as they could, while the giant snake chased at a frightening speed. They were getting closer to the tower. With the last of his strength, Gong Yoo pushed Songhyekyo up the stairs of the tower. When they were almost at the top, the snake jumped, trying to bite. However, Gong Yoo managed to kick him back to the ground. Their breaths were ragged, their bodies were tired, but they were finally safe. After successfully reaching the watchtower, Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo tried to calm themselves down for a moment. They sat on the floor of the tower, trying to catch their breaths. Gong Yoo checked Songhyekyo's condition, making sure she wasn't hurt. "Are you okay?" he asked in a soft voice. Songhyekyo nodded, even though her hands were still shaking. They looked down the tower, making sure the giant snake was gone. However, the darkness of the night made it difficult to see clearly. Gong Yoo took the risk to look around the tower, looking for something that could be used as a weapon or tool. He found an old flashlight and some sticks that could be used to defend themselves. "We can't stay here too long," Gong Yoo said. "We have to find a way to the city before dawn." Songhyekyo agreed, even though her body was still tired. They decided to descend from the tower carefully, making sure there was no danger lurking. With flashlights in hand, they began walking towards the city lights that could be seen in the distance. The atmosphere of the forest that night was very tense. The sounds of nocturnal animals and the wind rustling through the trees kept them alert. Each step they took was filled with tension, afraid that the giant snake would reappear. Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound from the bushes beside them. Gong Yoo immediately pointed his flashlight towards the sound, ready to face whatever appeared. However, all he saw was a small deer jumping in fear. Songhyekyo smiled slightly, trying to ease the tension. "We have to stay focused," Gong Yoo said. "Don't let your guard down." They continued walking, following the direction of the city lights. However, the more they walked, the more they felt like they were going around in circles in the same place. "Are we lost again?" Songhyekyo asked in a worried voice. Gong Yoo tried to calm her down, although inside he was also starting to have doubts. Suddenly, they heard footsteps from a distance. Gong Yoo immediately turned off the flashlight and pulled Songhyekyo behind a large tree. "Quiet," he whispered. They both held their breath, trying to hear the voice more clearly. "Is anyone here?" A man's voice came from a distance. Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo looked at each other, hesitating whether to answer or stay hidden. Finally, Gong Yoo decided to take a risk. "We're here," he shouted. A few moments later, two men in climbing clothes and carrying powerful flashlights appeared. "We're from the search and rescue team," one of the men said. "We've been looking for you since this afternoon." Songhyekyo almost cried with relief. Thank you so much," she said in a trembling voice. Gong Yoo was also relieved, though he was still wary. "How did you find us?" he asked. "Someone saw you entering the forest from the wrong path and reported it to the climbing post," the man replied. "We've been looking for you ever since." With the help of the rescue team, Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo finally made it out of the forest. They were taken to the nearest climbing post, where they were given warm food and blankets. Their bodies were still tired, but the relief they felt was much greater. "We will never forget this experience," Songhyekyo said as she held Gong Yoo's hand. Gong Yoo nodded, looking at her with affection. "We promise to be more careful in the future, okay?" They both smiled, though they still looked tired. The rescue team gave them a ride back to the city. As they sat in the car, Songhyekyo looked out the window, watching the forest now look serene under the moonlight. "We're safe," she whispered. Gong Yoo held her hand tightly. "Yes, we're safe. And we'll get through it together." The next day, Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo decided to end their vacation early. They returned to the city with stories they would never forget. Although the experience was terrifying, it also strengthened their bond. They promised to be more careful on their future adventures and to never neglect safety again. At home, they sat together on the couch, sipping hot cups of tea. "Do you still want to go hiking?" Songhyekyo asked with a smile. Gong Yoo laughed. "Maybe not anytime soon. But if we do it again someday, we'll be more prepared." They both laughed, feeling the warmth and togetherness they had. Even though their adventure turns into a nightmare, it also teaches them about strength, courage, and the true meaning of protecting each other. After a few days back to their routine in the city, Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo still often talked about their experience in the forest. That night, They sat on the balcony of Songhyekyo's apartment, looking up at the night sky filled with stars. The cool air and calm atmosphere allowed them to reflect quietly. "You know, even though it was scary, I feel like we're closer now," Songhyekyo said while holding her cup of warm tea. Gong Yoo smiled, looking at her affectionately. "I feel the same way too. We went through something big together, and it made us stronger." They sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the moment together. However, behind the calm, Gong Yoo still felt something was wrong. "I'm still curious about that giant snake," he said suddenly. "Was it really real, or was it just a hallucination because of our fear?" Songhyekyo frowned. "I thought about it too. But we both saw it, right? It couldn't have been just a hallucination." The next day, Gong Yoo decided to do some research on the forest where they got lost. He searched online, read articles, and even contacted a biologist who specialized in researching endangered animals. Songhyekyo helped enthusiastically, though she still felt a little scared from the experience. They found several reports of giant snake sightings in the forest, though no concrete evidence had ever been found. "Maybe it's just a legend," Songhyekyo said, trying to convince herself. But Gong Yoo wasn't convinced. "Whatever it is, we have to know the truth." They decided to contact the rescue team that had helped them get out of the forest. After a few phone calls, they were finally connected to a forest ranger named Mr. Kim. "We want to know more about the giant snake," Gong Yoo said as they met Mr. Kim at a small cafe. Mr. Kim sighed. "You're not the only ones who've seen it. There have been several reports, but we've never been able to prove it. The forest is full of mysteries." Though Songhyekyo was hesitant at first, Gong Yoo convinced her to return to the forest with Mr. Kim and the research team. "We won't be alone this time," he said, "and we'll be better prepared." They prepared themselves well, bringing complete equipment and weapons just in case. When they entered the forest, the atmosphere that had been tense before now felt different. The sun was shining brightly, and the birds were chirping happily. However, the tension was still felt between them. Mr. Kim led them to the area where Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo had last seen the giant snake. "We'll set up a surveillance camera here," he said. "If something big moves, we'll know about it." That night, they camped near the area. A campfire was burning, providing warmth and light in the darkness of the forest. Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo sat close together, trying to calm themselves. Suddenly, the familiar rustling sound was heard again. "There's something there," Mr. Kim whispered, pointing a flashlight toward the sound. From behind the bushes, the same giant snake emerged. Its golden yellow eyes stared intently at them. "Don't move," Mr. Kim said in a calm voice. "We have a camera, we have to record this." However, the snake did not attack. He just stood there as if observing them. After a while, the snake slowly slithered away, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. The next morning, they checked the camera footage. The giant snake was clearly captured. "This is the evidence we need," Mr. Kim said excitedly. "We have to report this to the authorities." Gong Yoo and Songhyekyo felt relieved. They finally got the answers they were looking for. Although the experience was still terrifying, they felt satisfied that they had faced their fears and found the truth. "We did it," Songhyekyo said as she held Gong Yoo's hand. "And we did it together." Gong Yoo smiled, looking at her affectionately. "Yes, we did it together. And I know that no matter what happens in the future, we will face it together." The two of them left the forest with a sense of relief and a stronger sense of togetherness. Their adventure may have started as a nightmare, but it ended with a valuable lesson about strength, courage, and the true meaning of love and support.